There is a question that the Democratic Party has spent the last 4 years refusing to ask itself. Is not a question about Donald Trump. Is not a question about Fox News or misinformation or the Electoral College. It is a question that Bill Maher, a man who has voted Democratic his entire life, believes the party must answer before it ever wins another national election.
Somewhere along the way, my values became code for I'm the only one with a moral compass. You know what would have been a better exercise? Write a top 10 list to yourself where you try to imagine 10 reasons why 77 million Americans didn't want to trust you with taking power. And I say that as someone who votes Democratic. As I like to remind my very pure friends, we voted for the same person. You're just why she lost.
In this video, Bill Maher does something that few within his own party are willing to do. He names the values that once defined American liberalism. He identifies the moment those values were abandoned. And he warns that a political party which cannot say what it stands for out loud is a political party that will keep losing every election. But to understand how the Democratic Party arrived at this moment, one must first look at what happened in 2020 when the left, in Maher's own words, got a little carried away.
And then admit that in 2020, the left got a little carried away. Carried away, like most of the merch at this shoe store. Get it, carried away? Once in a while, they need a lick. Looting was rebranded as justice shopping. We stopped arresting shoplifters. Anti-racist Baby was a bestseller. Corporations took DEI to ludicrous lengths. We opened our hearts to all who wanted to come here, and then also our borders. Portland decriminalized all drugs, and Seattle set up a no-cop zone until they had to reverse course on both. Standardized testing was dropped until schools saw how dumb that was.
Each of these decisions, taken individually, might have been dismissed as an experiment. Taken together, they represented something else entirely, a fundamental renegotiation of the boundaries between order and chaos, between assimilation and fragmentation, between a nation and a collection of grievances. And it raised a question that Maher has returned to again and again, one that cuts to the very core of what it means to be an American.
Now, most immigrants still want to assimilate, but some now have this other attitude of melting pot. You melt. Look, you don't have to love everything about America. We don't. That's why Yelp was invented. But, you know, if you do get past ice, America's actually pretty cool. We say you do you. Eat the food your grandma cooked. Speak another language at home. Celebrate religious holidays. We welcome your food, your art, your fashion, your first ladies. But you have to answer one question. Do you like Western civilization? Because that's what we are, and that's not negotiable.
Do you like Western civilization? It is a question that sounds almost archaic in modern political discourse. Yet Maher insists it is the diagnostic question his party refuses to ask. Not because the answer must be uncritical adoration, but because a political movement that is embarrassed by its own civilization has no foundation upon which to build. And that embarrassment, according to Maher, is not abstract. It is visible in the way institutions treat their own customers, their own voters, and their own history. Consider what happened to Cracker Barrel.
Because even Cracker Barrel recently decided that they felt a little embarrassed that it was so popular with bumpkins who salivate at the sight of an old wagon wheel screwed to the wall. So they changed it to this, which got them no new customers, well, off the old ones. It reminded me of when Chuck Schumer said in 2016 that for every blue-collar Democrat we lose in Western Pennsylvania, we're going to pick up 2 moderate Republicans in the suburbs of Philly, Ohio, Illinois, and Wisconsin. Yeah, how'd that work out? But at least Cracker Barrel had the sense to immediately say, oh, sorry, and put the sling blades back on the wall. Democrats don't seem to be doing that.
The Cracker Barrel parable is not about interior design. It is about contempt for the customer base that built you. And Maher sees the same pattern repeating across the cultural landscape. He points to another institution that began as a working-class staple and ended as a boutique for the elite, Barney's department store.
They still seem to want to be that upscale store that impresses celebrities. Anybody remember Barney's? It was this store in New York that started in the 1920s, as a discount clothing joint on unfashionable, grimy 7th Avenue, a place where their customers, the working man, could get a decent suit at a very reasonable price. I remember going there in 1993 to get my wardrobe for a new show Comedy Central was launching called Politically Incorrect. Thank you. Yeah. We had no budget, and this was a place you could buy 5 suits for $2,000. Well, right after that, they opened a place on Madison Avenue, Barney's did, where you could buy 1 suit for $5,000. They wanted to party with the cool kids, and for a while they got to. For a while.
For a while is perhaps the most haunting phrase in political analysis. Barney's wanted to party with the cool kids, and for a while they got to. Then they went bankrupt. Maher's implication is unmistakable. The Democratic Party has undergone the same transformation, trading its working-class foundation for the approval of cultural elites, and the bill is now coming due. But the fracture runs deeper than economics. It has entered the most intimate domain of American life, the family.
That's what they call it now, go no contact. This belief that Trump voters, even if it's your own parents, are too deplorable for human contact and must be cut off. You know, like Scientologists do to suppressive people. A former speechwriter for Obama named David Litt wrote an op-ed this year called, "Is it time to stop snubbing your right-wing family?" where he admitted he'd had a change of heart and that was the wrong approach. So, of course, then the woke wing tried to banish him for breaking ranks on their policy of hating people who don't agree with you on everything, because what fun is life if you're not cutting somebody off? Mr. Litt asked the question, what has all this vanishing accomplished?
What has all this vanishing accomplished? It is a question that hangs over the entire Democratic project. If your political strategy requires the severing of family bonds, what exactly are you building? Maher returns to this theme with a specific example that would have been unthinkable in American politics just 1 decade ago.
You know, I get it that for the Democrats, this was a brutal loss. But the plan to deal with it has to be something better than stay in a snit and take advantage of this magical time of year to cut people off. The Huffington Post has articles like, "My husband voted for Trump, so I'm canceling Thanksgiving and Christmas." Oh, gee, not having to buy you a present. That'll teach him. But family isn't like gender. You can't fix it by cutting off members. The chief psychiatric resident at Yale University, Amanda Calhoun, recently told Joy Reid it's okay to cut off family members if they voted for Trump and tell them, "I'm not going to be around you this holiday." Oh, how pure. It's like not letting certain people sit with you on the bus. She also said that it shouldn't be automatic that family members think they're entitled to your time. She said that's just a societal norm. Family. Who do they think they are? Family?
When a chief psychiatric resident at Yale University appears on national television to normalize the severing of family ties over voting preferences, something has shifted in the culture that cannot be undone by a campaign slogan. Maher's point is that this is not politics. It is Puritanism. And Puritanism, in his view, has replaced the animating ideas that once drove the Democratic Party. One guest on Maher's program put it in historical terms that make the contrast impossible to ignore.
I think that's right. You know, John Kennedy had a great line, Mark, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And I think the Democratic Party has sort of inverted that right now. The animating ideas behind the Democratic Party are, one, the giant welfare state, which is just consuming us and is doing things like providing welfare benefits for people making as much as $500,000 for cooking classes. And then the identity politics, the identity grievance, which is this idea that the West is somehow oppressive, when in fact the West has done more to liberate billions of people and guarantee the economic advancement, security of billions of people, more so than any system ever.
The inversion of Kennedy is a devastating historical framing. Where the Democratic Party once asked citizens what they could contribute, it now asks what the state can provide. Where it once celebrated the West as a liberating force, it now treats Western civilization as a source of original sin. And nowhere is this inversion more visible than on the issue of immigration, which Maher treats as the Democratic equivalent of Republican healthcare, a policy area where rhetoric and reality have diverged so completely that the party has lost all credibility.
If we ever want this nation to be not broken, both sides have to admit what they suck at. Ask a Republican what the plan is for health care. It'll be cheaper and everyone will be covered and no one will ever die and it'll be out in 2 weeks.
We're going to have fantastic health care.
We have a great plan coming out. It's just about completed now.
Within 2 weeks.
3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks. It might be Sunday, but it's going to be very soon.
The Democrat version of that is immigration. Here's a graph that shows immigration under Bush and then Obama and then Trump first term, pretty much the same. Then we get to Biden. Well, Democrats can say they weren't for open borders, but it sure looks like someone left the gate unlocked. There are 500 million people in South and Central America. We can't take them all. Someone's got to grow the cocaine.
Pretty much the same. Then we get to Biden. The graph tells a story that talking points cannot obscure. And Maher, speaking with a guest who challenges the administration's record, makes clear that the issue is not opposition to immigration itself, but the abandonment of any meaningful standard for order.
You know, they punted it. Okay, you're absolutely right. Immigration did go up during those years.
Well, asylum. They changed the definition of asylum, and
yes.
They immediately reversed, like stay in Mexico or wait in Mexico or something. He
Yes,
had a different
chill
policy.
out in Mexico.
I mean,
Was that-
chill out in
Yeah.
Mexico. Yes.
Just fucking chill, man. Wait there.
And we were still, letting in, as we should. We are a nation of immigrants, and we need immigrants.
There you go.
But most Americans felt, including lots of Democrats and people of color, and he won the Latino vote by half. Come on, man. Like, at a certain point, everybody was around the idea that, okay, immigration, fine, but it has to be somewhat orderly, and not anyone.
Yes, and again,
and asylum had a certain specific meaning, which
Yes.
went up in the air. They overcorrected.
Asylum had a certain specific meaning which went up in the air. It is a quiet phrase that contains an enormous accusation that the Democratic Party did not merely expand immigration policy, but dissolve the very definitions that made it a policy at all. And Maher warns that this is not an isolated American phenomenon. He points to a country that has already traveled this road to its conclusion.
It's funny because this was Canada's main opposition party in 2011. Now they're in a distant third place. Sound familiar? Yeah? And why? The modern left in America and now Canada placed one issue above all: identity. Forget illegals, homelessness, or the baffling popularity of Drake. Their strategy? Equity cards. They created a system where differences are exalted instead of similarities, which only results in conflict. They end up turning on themselves because identity politics is a zero-sum game. I suppose other Canadians should be grateful. I mean, if you let the self-absorbed devour each other, they're less likely to annoy you. Except until they get into power.
A zero-sum game is perhaps the most precise description of where identity politics leads when it becomes the organizing principle of a political movement, not coalition, but cannibalism. And yet, even as the Democratic Party struggles to articulate its own values, Maher observes that it has no difficulty denying credit to its opponents for achievements that would have been celebrated without hesitation had they occurred under a different administration.
You say, no mention of the perfect border. The border is closed.
The border's a win.
The border's a win. We don't want to become the kidnap country. The taking out of Iran's nuclear capability. I was very supportive of bombing the nuclear facility in Iran. I thought that was great. Venezuela. Do I love everything about it? No. But do I hate it? No. If he somehow gets Venezuela, Cuba, and Iran all to be not these horrible places they were, he should get a Nobel Peace Prize. The return of the hostages and the peace deal in the Middle East, where the liberal panel was praising you. A lot of people tried to pull this off. He did.
Give him credit. If he's good at getting deals done overseas, give him credit for it.
And here's a few you didn't even mention.
Give him credit. It is a simple request that reveals a profound asymmetry. Maher and his guests are willing to praise foreign policy achievements regardless of which president secures them. The question is whether the Democratic Party can extend the same intellectual honesty to its own domestic failures. Because Maher believes there was a moment, late in the 2024 campaign, when the party could have changed the entire conversation with a single honest statement about education.
But I also think Kamala Harris could have a moment if she trotted out her favorite phrase and said, let me be very clear. Our schools need to do better. Our kids need to be in school, and when they're there, they need to have the phones off and the brains on, learning the basic things we used to teach. And the idea that testing is rooted in white supremacy is in itself a racist belief that says black children can't compete with white children on tests, which they surely can.
She surely can is the kind of sentence that used to be uncontroversial in the party of the Civil Rights Act. Yet Maher suggests that modern democratic politics has become so entangled in ideological performance that even this straightforward appeal to excellence has become unsayable. And the consequences of that silence are not merely rhetorical. They are electoral. They are existential. One guest on Maher's program described the internal dynamics with the bluntness of a man who has watched the coalition fracture from the inside.
You, the Democratic Party, you got to come together. You cannot, listen, this is what socialists in this country on the Democratic side are doing. Their mentality is, yo, flow with us. Otherwise, you ain't going to get our vote. And we going to convince people not to go to the polls for you. Here's my point. Last time I checked, we still in a binary system. You vote one way or the other. Where you going? Where's the Democrats that's going to look at the democratic socialists of the party and say,
where is the Democrat who will look at the socialists and say no? Is a question that echoes through every losing political party in history. When the ideological fringe gains veto power over the coalition ceases to function. And Maher argues that the Democratic Party's specific failure has been its cowardice in confronting its own extremists, even when those extremists advance positions that defy basic, observable reality.
Conservatives think the liberals are insane, and they're not completely wrong. Now, I don't think most liberals are insane, but neither do they make it clear they disapprove of the ones who are, and their cowardice in not marginalizing their own crazies has been their downfall. I couldn't get Neil deGrasse Tyson, a genius scientist and preeminent scientific voice in the media, to agree that it was ridiculous for Scientific American and The Atlantic to be claiming that separating sports by doesn't make sense. Yes, it does. Actually, it makes perfect sense. And it's obvious that it does. And there's a lot of stuff like that on the left. And when conservatives see it, they say, I'm sorry, we're just not going to go along with reinventing society, often pointlessly, even if we have to cancel democracy to do it. That's what they're saying. They see gender as only a construct, and they say, we're not doing that. Transing kids by self-diagnosis with no age limit, no parental notification, and no acknowledgement of social contagion, not doing it.
Not doing it is the two-word response that Maher believes explains the 77 million votes. Not enthusiasm for Donald Trump, not Russian interference, not a failure of messaging, but a simple, immovable refusal by millions of Americans to accept the re-engineering of society's most basic categories. And Maher's argument is that this refusal is not conservative. It is liberal. It is the liberalism of free speech, of equal rights, of the separation of religion and state, of democracy over theocracy. These are not negotiable. These are the foundation.
There's lots of stuff we don't do here, and it's not negotiable, and it's not white values. These are liberal values. People fought and died to establish them, and it's not racist to say, if you want to come here to help form a more perfect union, great. But some things are too fundamental to change. The separation of religion and state, for example. And I would say the same thing to nationalists. Democracy, not theocracy. Free speech, even about religion. Equal rights for women. That's America.
That is the whole diagnosis. This may be one of the most honest statements a lifelong liberal has made on television in years. Because Maher just did what few Democrats are willing to do. He drew a line. He named a value. He said out loud what the country actually is. In Maher's view, this is the exact conversation his party needs to have and refuses to have. Free speech is not negotiable. Equal rights are not negotiable. Separation of religion and state is not negotiable. Democracy over theocracy is not negotiable. These are not conservative ideas. These are the foundations. And a political party that cannot say the words, "These are our values," out loud is a party that will keep losing every election. And it should be winning.
Somewhere along the way, my values became code for I'm the only one with a moral compass. You know, it would have been a better exercise? Write a top 10 list to yourself where you try to imagine 10 reasons why 77 million Americans didn't want to trust you with taking power. And I say that as someone who votes Democratic. As I like to remind my very pure friends, we voted for the same person. You're just why she lost. Can we please try to remember, especially at this time of year, that most people don't decide their politics. They inherit them. It's about where you grew up in America, what your parents taught you, your life experiences, your religion.
Bill Maher has already made his case. The country has already delivered its verdict. The only question left is whether the party finally listens or watches the last of its own founding principles walk out the door. Now, I want to hear from you. So tell me, is Bill Maher the last liberal left in America with the courage to draw a line? Can the modern Democratic Party ever come back to its own founding values? And is 2028 the year the party finally faces the truth, or the year the truth finally leaves the party behind? Drop your answer in the comments. Hit that like if Maher said what needed to be said.